Have you guys ever noticed that while you're watching a movie, how your eyes are automatically drawn to a particular part of the frame? That's because everything from the subjects, their surroundings, and even where the camera is placed is all part of something called composition. And today we're going to break down how some of the best cinematographers use the art of framing and composition to tell a story. First, in order to understand how to compose beautiful shots and what they mean, we need to establish what composition is. And basically what composition is in film is the arrangement of elements in a frame. This can mean people, objects, landscapes, and even light and shadow. And the way you compose your shot can really deliver a feeling to your audience. Now, a very symmetrical shot can give the feeling balance, while having a frame completely unbalanced can symbolize chaos. You can even showcase power dynamics between characters just by placing them in particular points of the frame. Which brings us to our next topic, and that is points of interest. Every filmmaker will compose a shot with a point of interest in mind. And if we break that down to its simplest state, there are two elements to think about when you're composing a shot: the subject, or the point of interest, and the background. And there are many ways to bring your audience's eyes to the point of interest in your frame. Now, the first one that we're going to talk about is obvious. This is focus point. More often than not, the subject where you want your audience to look is going to be in focus, while the foreground or the background is out of focus. And racking focus from one subject to another will automatically tell us where to pay attention in your frame. Another way to do this is by using symmetry to draw your audience's eyes to a particular point in the frame. And that's because there's these leading lines pointing us right towards the point of interest. In this scene from Tenet, the main character is between these railroad tracks, creating these lines leading you right to our main character. Now, it's kind of obvious in this particular frame because you have him sitting right in the middle of the frame. But if we take a look at this scene from Ad Astra, our character is not in the center of the frame. However, there are still leading lines that brings you to this point of interest. And if you pay close attention, you can start to realize that they do this a lot in films, where they have all of these lines leading you to that point of interest. Another way that you guys can think about composing your shots is by using something called the rule of thirds. Chances are, if you've been into cinematography or even photography for a little while, you've definitely heard this before. And even though this is a very basic concept, it's extremely helpful when it comes to composing your shots, or at least giving you a starting point on how to begin composing your shot. Now, in order to use the rule of thirds, you have to place your subject at one of the four intersecting points on the vertical and the horizon points in your frame. And if you guys really pay attention, you can start to see this time and time again across many different films and many different genres. Now, of course, you don't have to follow this rule of thirds all the time, but having this in the back of your mind while you're trying to compose your shots is definitely going to be helpful, especially when you're starting from scratch and you kind of have a blank slate to work with. It could be a little bit overwhelming. At least having an idea of splitting the screen or your frame into three equal parts and understanding where each person or each object should go in that frame is definitely going to allow you to have some sort of balance in your composition. Another great tool to help you guys compose your shots is the use of shapes. And what shapes do is they allow us to make sense of a frame. It's almost like we find this familiarity in these different shapes that we're comfortable seeing. The use of squares, triangles, and circles are such an easy way to build a clean frame. And a big reason why they have the ability to do this is because they create frames within frames, allowing your viewer to have a narrow point of interest within your scene. And this frame within a frame can have such a big impact on your scene. A small frame can give you an uncomfortable, kind of claustrophobic feeling, while a larger frame could allow us to feel a little bit more comfortable and satisfied. And the amount of space that that frame takes up plays a huge role in telling your audience how they should feel about that frame. And speaking of space, another huge factor in framing cinematic compositions is depth and space in your shot. When we sit down and we watch a film, we're watching it in two dimensions. So one extremely important factor to composing cinematic images is to create this illusion of depth in your scene. And the way I like to think about this is building your composition in layers. Having something in the foreground, something somewhere in the middle, and then thinking about where you're going to place your background and where the focus points are. And vice versa. If you're focusing on something in the background, having something really out of focus, even if it's just a small little piece of the frame in the foreground, will allow you to give your viewer this sense of depth and, of course, giving you that cinematic look. So the next time you're composing your scene, try placing your character in one layer and have multiple layers behind them, whether that be other characters, objects, or even landscape that can allow your audience to have some sort of perception of depth in your film. Now, by having your subject in an establishing shot where you're showcasing the vast landscape around them, you can start to make your subject feel insignificant or small. And of course, vice versa. By having your subject really close and tight to the frame, you start to make your subject feel big and powerful. And if we stop and we think about that for a second, this could be a great way to showcase power dynamics between characters. By placing a character closer to the camera, giving them more space in your frame versus another character who's taking up less space in the frame could actually make the character closer to the camera feel more powerful and big, or as if they're sort of in control of the situation. And then you have something called headroom and lead room. Headroom being the amount of space above your character's head, and lead room being the amount of space in front or behind your character. Giving your character a lot of space or headroom can give a sense of calmness in your frame, while giving them less headroom and having a tighter frame on their face could make it feel a little bit more claustrophobic, a little bit more intense or dramatic. And when it comes to lead room, typically characters will have more space in front of them than behind them. By giving them more space behind them, you draw the audience's attention to that negative space, which could be a great storytelling tool if you want to introduce a character walking in from behind them. And if you guys are looking for inspiration for your next film project, then you got to check out a company called Film Vibes. Film Vibes is a database of over 1 million clips from films, music videos, and commercials. And the whole reason behind this company is to be able to help filmmakers source assets for their treatments, pitch decks, and storyboards. Now, what me and my partner have found, which we didn't expect, was how inspirational it could be for any and all filmmaker. Because we have over 1 million assets to choose from, and you could actually see camera movements, color palettes. And if you guys are interested in signing up, I'll leave a link down below, 20% discount code to anybody who signs up. And yeah, man, even if you don't want to sign up and you just want to browse for free and you want to check out all the different inspirational videos and films that we have on there, you could actually search all of that stuff for free and actually use PNGs to grab stills for free. So I definitely urge you guys to go and check that out. Now, when it comes to composing shots, one of the main things that you have to answer is where to put your subject in relation to the frame, the background, and the other characters. And when we really break it down, there's only 4 different composition types. You have center frame, where we have the subject right dead in the middle of the center of the frame. Then you have left heavy, where you have the subject, of course, in the left of the frame. And then you have right heavy, which, of course, you guys guessed it, you have your subject in the right of the frame. And then you have something called short side framing, where you place your subject close to the side of the frame where they're looking without giving them that extra looking space. All of these techniques can help guide you guys to frame your scenes. But I think the most important factor by far is your script. And just like with anything else that I've talked about on this channel, I'm a firm believer in, in order to tell a good visual story, it starts with the script. It starts by looking at the script, taking a look at, what each scene is meant to feel like, who are the characters and what is the relationship to them and the visual story that you're trying to tell. And when you do that and you really pay attention to that, you'll start to understand like how you need to compose your shots and the relationship between, each character or the environment that they're in. You should try to ask yourself, is there a particular power dynamic between characters? Are you trying to give importance to a certain object in a scene? How small or how big do you want a character to feel? It's so important as a director, filmmaker, or even a cinematographer to go through your script and start making these decisions and be very methodical about how you want to compose your frame. The better you understand what each scene is trying to say, the more sense of the frame and the composition you'll be able to make. And if you guys want to learn more about cinematography and just filmmaking in general, me and my team are putting together a course that we hope to have out by the end of this year. So if you guys are interested, I'll leave a link right up here. You guys can check that out. And yeah, man, I want to thank you guys so much for stopping in and hanging out. My name is Zarfati, and I'll see you guys next week. Deuces.